Welcome, friend. Tonight we give you The Dinner Party. This space horror story is perfect for fans of scary stories, creepypasta, and extraterrestrial horror. If you're into dark sci-fi and chilling survival tales, this alien abduction story will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss this terrifying journey through space. So now please sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. And don't forget to keep the lights on.
We always thought Earth was the battleground, but war has a way of evolving. When humanity finally broke the barrier of space, we learned that the universe wasn't empty. My name is Staff Sergeant James Winters, part of the United States Space Rangers, a new branch of the Army Rangers trained for space combat. And now I find myself trapped aboard an alien vessel, used for a horrible purpose by creatures that are far more terrifying than any enemy I've faced. I don't know how much time I have left, but if you're reading this, know that Earth may still stand a chance, but you'll have to fight like hell. The U.S. Space Rangers were created in the wake of new threats from space. The mission was simple: protect Earth and our interests in space at all costs. Equipped with advanced exosuits and zero-gravity combat training, we became the first and last line of defense against anything that dared to challenge our planet. No one ever expected we'd actually use those skills until the invasion. It started small, strange signals detected beyond the asteroid belt. At first, everyone thought it was just noise, some space anomaly. But those signals became stronger, more regular, too rhythmic to be natural. The brass up top told us to be on alert, but they still didn't believe. No one wanted to face the fact that something out there was watching us. That was until the first ship arrived. I was deployed on the ISS, which had become a forward observation post for the Space Rangers. There wasn't much to see out there, just the stars and the quiet void of space. But that all changed the night the station's alarms went off. I remember the lights flashing and the AI warning system shouting at us, "Contact imminent." I bolted down the corridor toward the ops center, my pulse pounding. We'd trained for this, but no training could prepare us for the real thing. Captain Reyes was already there, running tactical assessments on the incoming object. "It's not one of ours," she muttered, eyes glued to the radar. "And it's moving fast." I peered over her shoulder. The object wasn't just fast, it was massive, and heading straight for the ISS. "Get ready," she yelled as we scrambled to our stations. Before we could react, the ship appeared. A hulking dark mass blotted out the stars as it approached. There was a terrible silence for a moment, the calm before the storm. Then, they hit us. They breached the hull with terrifying precision, like surgical strikes. We never even had a chance to fire back. The station buckled and shook as the alien intruders swarmed inside. I'd seen combat before, fought insurgents in off-world skirmishes, but nothing like this. These creatures moved like shadows, their forms barely distinguishable in the dark. Their eyes were the only clear thing, glowing red like embers in a dying fire. I didn't even have time to get a clean shot before they were on us. We fought hard. The Space Rangers weren't green recruits. We were trained killers, the best of the best. But our weapons, our tactics, none of it mattered against these things. They were fast, impossibly strong, and their armor deflected everything we threw at them. I remember the weight of the rifle in my hands as I fired into one of the creatures, only to watch the rounds glance off its insect-like carapace. Screams echoed through the station as my comrades were cut down. Some were dragged away, others slaughtered where they stood. The air filled with the sounds of metal scraping, claws clattering against the floor. My head swiveled, adrenaline surging, but no matter where I looked, there was no way out. Then, they came for me. I felt a sharp sting in my neck like being jabbed with a needle. My body seized up, all my muscles locking in place. I was paralyzed but fully conscious. They grabbed me, cold, skeletal hands gripping my arms as they carried me like a piece of meat. I couldn't move, couldn't fight back, but I could still feel everything. They dragged me through the wreckage of the ISS, past the bodies of my team, through broken walls and flickering lights. I knew we weren't on the ISS anymore when the air became thicker, humid, like I was being sucked into some kind of living machine. They'd taken me aboard their ship. The walls were metallic, but not human-made. They pulsed with a faint blue glow, like veins carrying blood through a living organism. The ceiling was high, and everything had a cold, sterile feeling to it. I had been trained for close-quarter combat in space, but there's nothing in the Ranger manual about what to do when you're captured by something not of this earth. They threw me into a chamber, a cage more than a room, and I heard the door seal shut with a heavy thud. That's when the real fear set in. I was their prisoner now, and I had no idea what they wanted with me. I spent what felt like days in that cold metallic chamber, my body numb from whatever drug they'd injected me with. The paralysis wore off slowly, leaving me with a pounding headache and aching limbs. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. At first, it was just a subtle sensation, a kind of tightness in my chest, like I couldn't quite catch my breath. I thought it was the atmosphere in the alien ship, but the feeling didn't go away. It got worse. Soon I felt something moving inside me. I tried to ignore it, convince myself it was just panic, just fear playing tricks on me. But it wasn't. The pressure in my chest grew sharper, and the feeling of something crawling beneath my skin became impossible to deny. I gasped for air, my hands clutching my chest as I felt it, something push against my ribs. I wasn't just their prisoner. I was an incubator. It hit me like a freight train. These things weren't just soldiers. They were parasites, and they'd planted one of their own inside me. I don't know how to describe the horror of feeling something alive inside your own body. It squirmed, feeding on me, growing, preparing to burst free. My mind was consumed with thoughts of death, of being torn apart from the inside. I would have given anything for a bullet, a knife, anything to end it before the inevitable happened. But I wasn't the only one. The chamber I was in, it wasn't a cell. It was a nursery. Around me there were others, dozens of bodies strapped to metallic slabs, their chests swollen grotesquely, their skins stretched and bruised as the larvae inside them fed. Some were still alive, their eyes wide with terror, gasping in pain as their bodies were consumed. Others had already been split open, their chests torn apart, their organs hollowed out as the creatures crawled free. The air was thick with the stench of blood and rot. The walls of the nursery dripped with condensation, and the floor was slick with the remains of those who hadn't survived the incubation. I gagged as the bile rose in my throat, but there was no escaping it. I watched as one of the aliens approached a body nearby. Private Hawkins, one of my squad mates, was barely recognizable. His face was contorted in pain, his body swollen and pulsing. I wanted to scream, to warn him, but the words stuck in my throat. The alien leaned over him, its claws delicately slicing into his flesh with precision. Hawkins's chest burst open, and the thing inside him, the larva, wriggled free, covered in gore and black mucus. The alien picked up the newborn creature, cradling it with a reverence that made me sick to my core. Then it left, carrying the spawn into the dark corridors of the ship, leaving Hawkins' body discarded, empty. It was only a matter of time before I met the same fate. I didn't know how long I'd been in that nightmare of metal and flesh. Time became a blur, just an endless series of agony and anticipation of the inevitable. My strength was nearly gone. The thing inside me was relentless, pushing and writhing beneath my ribs like some hellish parasite. I could feel it growing with every passing minute, demanding release, and I knew I didn't have much time. But I couldn't let it end like this. Not after everything. Not like the others. When one of the aliens entered the chamber to check on me, I made my move. I'd been watching them for days, how they moved, how they operated. This one was smaller, a caretaker of sorts. I waited until it was close enough, then I struck. The restraints around my wrists had loosened over time as my body became more emaciated, and with a surge of desperate strength, I ripped my arm free and lunged at the creature. Its reaction was immediate, hissing, clicking, trying to escape my grip. But I was too fast, too desperate. I slammed its head against the metal floor with all the force I could muster. I felt its exoskeleton crack under my fist. It twitched violently, but I kept going, kept smashing until its body went limp and black. Ichor oozed out of its skull. I stood there panting, trembling. My chest burned, and the thing inside me squirmed angrily, as if sensing that its time was running out. I grabbed a piece of sharp, broken metal from the floor and turned toward the door. I wasn't going to die here. Not yet. I staggered through the dim, metallic corridors of the alien ship, the walls pulsing with an eerie, faint glow. My body felt like it was falling apart, every movement sending waves of pain through my chest. The ship seemed alive, the walls occasionally shifting, the floor beneath my feet warm and slightly spongy, like flesh wrapped in steel. The sound of the ship was constant, a low hum that resonated through my bones, almost like a heartbeat. I had no plan, no real direction. I just needed to get out. But the deeper I went, the more I realized how colossal the alien craft was. I was no longer in a station or a simple ship. I was inside something massive, something built for more than just transportation. This was a breeding ground, a fortress. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, the layout confusing and disorienting. I passed other cells, some filled with grotesque scenes of human bodies in various stages of infestation, their chests swollen and ready to burst. Some were still alive, their faces twisted in silent screams. Others had already been split open, their remains hollowed out and discarded. I kept moving, fighting back the nausea and panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I was dead. I stumbled into a larger chamber, and what I saw nearly broke me. It was a massive nursery, but not like the small cells I'd been in. This place was a factory for the breeding of their kind. Rows upon rows of human bodies were suspended in organic pods, their bellies grotesquely distended, pulsating as the larvae within grew. The air was thick with the smell of decay and birth, a sickening combination of blood, flesh, and something far worse. The aliens moved about, tending to the pods, nurturing their offspring like proud parents. I watched in horror as one of the creatures gently sliced open a pod, revealing the swollen, dead body of a soldier inside. The thing inside him, black and slimy, wriggled free and into the waiting arms of the alien, who cradled it as though it were its own child. I had to force myself not to scream. I was next. I could feel the pressure in my chest building, the thing inside me thrashing as it grew impatient. My time was running out. I backed away, trying to steady my breathing. The door on the far side of the chamber beckoned, and I made my way toward it, hoping beyond hope that it led somewhere, anywhere, away from this nightmare. But as I crossed the threshold, I heard a sound behind me, a wet, sickening gurgle. I turned just in time to see the alien I'd killed earlier, the one I'd bashed into the ground, staggering into the room, dragging its mangled body across the floor. It raised its head, and those red eyes locked onto me, filled with a terrifying, unnatural intelligence. It clicked its mandibles and let out a shrill, piercing cry, an alarm. The others turned toward me, their attention shifting from their breeding duties to the intruder in their midst. I was exposed. They came for me fast, too fast. I turned and ran, my heart slamming against my ribs as the thing inside me thrashed in time with my pounding footsteps. The corridors twisted around me, the ship shifting and pulsing like it was alive, trying to trap me within its metal veins. I could hear them behind me, dozens of them, their claws clicking against the metal floor, the guttural, inhuman sounds they made reverberating through the walls. They were faster than I was, more coordinated, but I had one advantage. I had nothing left to lose. I rounded a corner, sprinting into what looked like a control room. It was filled with strange, organic-looking machinery, the walls covered in thick tubes that pulsed and squirmed. I didn't understand any of it, but I didn't need to. There in the center of the room was a window, an airlock. I crashed into it, my hands fumbling at the controls. Behind me, I could hear them closing in, the clicking and hissing growing louder, sharper. My vision blurred with panic, my hands shaking, but somehow I managed to activate the door. The airlock hissed open. I jumped inside and slammed my hand on the emergency release. The door slammed shut behind me just as I saw the first of the creatures round the corner, its red eyes burning into mine with unholy rage. I hit the button again, and the outer door opened to the void of space. The vacuum of space yanked me out of the airlock with brutal force, pulling me into the infinite blackness. For a moment, everything was silent. The creatures were gone. The ship was a distant shape shrinking behind me, and I was floating, weightless, in the cold abyss. But the thing inside me wasn't done. I could feel it squirming and thrashing beneath my skin, desperate to break free. The pain was unbearable now. a constant, searing agony that threatened to consume me. My breath came in ragged gasps as my vision blurred, and I knew it was going to happen. It was going to tear me apart. I closed my eyes, floating in the blackness of space, waiting for the inevitable. But something strange happened. In the cold vacuum of space, the pressure, the relentless building pressure in my chest, began to subside. The thing inside me slowed, its thrashing growing weaker. I realized, with a mixture of hope and terror, that the vacuum was affecting the larva. It couldn't survive in space. I was dying, there was no doubt about that. But I wasn't going to die as their breeding ground. Not like this. As my vision faded and the cold seeped into my bones, I felt the creature inside me go still. And in that final moment, as I drifted into the endless void, I felt a twisted sense of victory. I wasn't going to let them win. They'll find my body floating out here eventually. Maybe the Rangers, maybe the aliens, or maybe no one. But if you're reading this, know that we weren't prepared. We never could be. The things out there in the void, they aren't just invaders. They're a plague. And they're coming. I didn't make it, but maybe if you find this in time, you still can.
Have you ever gotten a Snapchat from a girl?
Nope. Anyway, watch this.